My book, Philo's Trinity, has two very strong points as main ideas. Let's talk about this because one is the life of Philo of Alexandria and what he taught, and the other is how his teachings were not in the early first century church, but the teachings of Philo were taken up by the early church Greek philosophers or fathers who loved philosophy. They took up Philo's teachings and they incorporated them into the church. The main points of Philo's Trinity prepared by approved of God. The Trinity is a formulation by church Greek philosophers that came after the apostles. Alexandrian Greek Philosophy was the main influence and the main star, Philo of Alexandria. Philo was a first century Jewish Greek philosopher, and he really got into some things because he really wasn't following the Jewish tradition. He was following the philosophy of the Greeks. And Philo's place in history has never really been told by anyone. Most people talk about Philo and some of the things that he taught, but they never really get into Philo's Trinity, how Philo believed that God had two supreme and primary powers that had always been by God's side. In other words, Philo taught a Trinity. The School of Alexandria promoted Philo's teaching, also Clement and Origen. Philo came up with a formula which was taken from wisdom, that he taught that wisdom was second to God and was also God. He put that with the Logos, and so that they could find a time. Proverbs 8:22, the timing of this was at the creation of everything, wisdom was there. And so he put wisdom, which was feminine, with the Logos, and he came up with this formula: God, Word, and Wisdom. That formula would show up in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries. God, Word, and Wisdom was original from Philo of Alexandria. First person to coin the word Trinity, Theophilus of Antioch. His formula of the Trinity, God, Word, and Wisdom, came from Philo. One strong point that connects Philo with the Ante-Nicene Fathers or the Apostolic Fathers is his teaching of the 3 days before the Son. And this was taken up, and it's in the writings of Theophilus of Antioch. Theophilus of Antioch took his teaching and developed the first Trinity in history. The first person to coin the word Trinity was Theophilus. And he says that his formula is that the Trinity is God, Word, and Wisdom. And then he uses Genesis 1:26 to say, to who was God speaking but to his Word and his Wisdom. In other words, he was teaching the formula of Philo of Alexandria. His teaching of God, Word, and Wisdom was God in his two powers. It was God in his two creators. And it was the three persons of God. It's Genesis 18 expounded by Philo. Genesis 1:26, Philo was the first to teach that God was speaking to two other creators. And he uses Proverbs, as I mentioned before, Proverbs 8:22, to teach that the Logos wisdom existed with God before the world was made. This is Philo teaching. Logos Christology, John 1:1, by the Apostolic Fathers, came from Philo's Logos wisdom. Philo was mentioned by name by many of the Apostolic and Ante-Nicene Fathers. Some of them got carried away and they cited Philo 300 and 600 times. They really loved Philo's teachings. But these people were influenced by Philo, and it's proven not by my research but by the research of other scholars. Example, Dr. David T. Runia is one of them. And he says that Ignatius, Justin, Clement, Origen, Eusebius, Didymus, Gregory, Ambrose, all of these men, and many more, were influenced by Philo of Alexandria. The Catholic Church covered up Philo's place in Catholic theology. Why? Theologians in the 17th century proved Philo was not a Christian or a church bishop. So there you have it, Philo's Trinity. It deals with who Philo was, what he taught, what he believed, and then it deals with the Apostolic and Ante-Nicene Fathers who took up his writings and incorporated them into the church and developed the Trinity doctrine from there. This Trinity was finalized at the Nicene Council 325 and also the one of 381. But it's important to know that this teaching spread throughout the world. By the 8th century, the East and the West, they all believed the same thing. Why? Because the Catholic Church was in power and no one could go against the Catholic Church. You had to accept what the Catholic Church taught or be persecuted. It's important to know this. This is why the Trinity is so popular today, but it really is not a biblical doctrine. And the originator of the Trinity was Philo of Alexandria. Worldwide acceptance of Alexandrian theology came by the 8th century. Our entire Christian world, East and West, was Trinitarian.